live. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, minus all of the incorrect takes I had this past week. But other than that, I'm hanging on by a thread, Blake. I'm ready to talk about all this, though. This was, as we always say,
week.
When there's a slate that is not as bulked up with ranked unranked matchups. We always say every single time there's going to be upsets. There's going to be major shifts in the whole flow of who we think are the top teams. And so much changed. The Big 12 picture changed. Clemson laid an egg. I'm shocked that Dabo managed to do that. And then, of course, at the top, Texas A&M, Ohio State, Penn State, all that is just so much for us to get to.
A lot of us to get to. A&M goes down to South Carolina. Dude, I don't know of someone who does a national show that's been more bullish on South Carolina defensively than this guy right here. Told you so. Told you so.
Look,
Joe, let me just say this: they are the best front seven in college football.
Okay, no. Hold on. That is way too overreactionary.
They have more sacks than anybody in the country. They have more tackles for loss than anybody in the country.
That is so overreactionary.
They're one of the best teams in the SEC. Actually, the best team in the SEC in run defense outside of Ole Miss. They don't have an offense that's complementary to them, and the one time that they get an offense, they blank people in the second half. Don't you dare tell me that.
No. They have a top five front seven. They have a top five front seven, but to say that they're the number one front seven in the country, yes, they're leading statistical categories, but there are units that are deeper and better than them.
Number one.
They're going to play more meaningful games. Oregon, I would put over number one over them.
Not me. They don't have the sacks or the tackles for loss.
Not everything is defined by statistics.
No, not all teams get to play Boise State in week 4 and get a field goal at the end of it. Some of us have, by the way, in all seriousness, how about this, though, for South Carolina?
Yeah.
Their fifth straight top 10 opponent in the SEC this season. Every opponent that they had played at the time that they had played have been inside the top 10. Nobody, to this point, now going into Florida, who – we'll talk about Georgia here in just a minute, too. Joe, no team in the country has played more top 10 opponents in South Carolina. They finally break through and get a win on that, but we'll talk about that, too. But just wanted to throw that out there. Shane Beamer stays alive here.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly buys himself time. I know that a lot of folks
he ain't going nowhere.
Before the win that they had yesterday, there were some people that had speculated if this season continued to slow down in these close games against top opponents and they couldn't win them, that he might eventually find himself on the hot seat maybe after next year. It certainly does buy him time. He's always good for one. He's always good for one of these big games where they pull it out at home. We'll see how he finishes, though.
Good game last night as well. So Ohio State, Penn State, A&M, and South Carolina. Joe, we will also talk about Georgia and Florida. Here's a hot take for you. I'm full of them tonight. You ready? Mm-hmm. Best called game by Billy Napier at Florida, and it's still in a loss.
Which is so funny to say out loud because of how sloppy and bad they played in other areas, which is just it's crazy. But it sucks if DJ Lagway,
third string quarterback, preferred walk-on from Yale.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about here is they did call a pretty good game. If DJ Lagway doesn't go down, who knows how the game would have played out, but it all is summed up by a bad snap, a missed hold, and a ball rolling 34 yards, 40 yards down the field, and it getting recovered by Georgia. So, like, those mistakes still catch up to Billy Napier. I think that we aren't past the spot where we believe that he's done at the end of this season. He hasn't done anything to buy himself time. You can't buy yourself time because of a close-ish loss to Georgia.
I'm with you. But let me just play devil's advocate because I see it on Twitter from Florida fans. There's a strong possibility he beats Florida State. So it means he's got to upset one of these teams down the stretch. Now he's got a quarterback's hurt. So the likelihood of any of that happening is not strong.
Look, they're not doing that with a kid from Yale playing quarterback for them who's walking.
Unless they figure something out, which, I've seen teams do crazier things. Joe, we'll go in the ACC. Miami rolls Duke. Clemson gets clipped by Louisville, as you mentioned.
Can't wait to yell at you about Miami. Clemson.
Okay, hold on. What are you going to yell at me about Miami that did not factually play out?
My whole take with them is that it doesn't matter if they play mediocre defense, and it doesn't matter if they give up these big plays. It doesn't. They're Washington. How many times am I going to repeat this? They're Washington from last year.
No,
Washington
they're not.
did the
No,
same
they're not
shit.
Washington. No, they're not Washington from last year. It's a completely different scenario.
Washington last year.
Washington actually played ranked opponents during the season.
They had maybe 2 more ranked matchups at this point in the season that they played.
Right, and beat a top 5 team.
But that's not the comparison that I'm making. Obviously, not every comparison's for shot. The reason why I'm comparing them is that when they play bad defensively, they've got a great front seven. They've got a young secondary that's super inconsistent. When they play bad defensively, they can turn it on in a quarter and they can retake the lead. Dude, they were a 20-point favorite or something like that. They were down multiple scores and they still covered.
Think about this for just a quick moment. Duke was 117th in the country coming into this game in rushing yards. 117th.
I'm not worried about any of this.
Joe, it doesn't matter. At some point, you get beat when you're allowing teams that, Joe, are
you
not
said
only—
the same thing about Washington last year.
No,
we had the same argument every single week. You and I yelled at each other about
this.
You've
been wrong on TCU and Washington, and I promise
you. But
you—
I'm not saying that Miami's winning a national championship, but I was right that they were going to reach this.
God is my witness. I promise you this is going to happen. I don't know when, but if you continue to let teams that was 117th in the country in rush yards coming into the game and get almost 200 yards rushing on you, you are going to lose. Just because you're playing Rudy Putek and Ash Cheek State doesn't mean that down the stretch when you actually play somody and you allow them to do that.
Same exact thing about Washington last year.
Got clipped.
But no. But hold on. I am not saying that Miami is going to win a national championship. Miami, my whole point is that they're winning the ACC and that they are capable of going on a playoff run. That's what they're built for.
So
what I'm trying to argue here, it doesn't matter. Last year I was right about this.
What? No, you weren't.
I was. Washington, we argued every single week. Every week you told me Washington was going to lose. Washington was going to lose. And they kept winning.
The playoffs in Texas and Washington were highly flawed, and you know that they were. Both of them had
still got to the national championship game.
Texas literally did not get to a national championship game.
No, I'm saying Washington got to the national championship game.
And there's a lot of luck that was built into that too. Now that Du Bois
and Oregon's an awfully lucky, or Miami's an awfully lucky team. That's my whole point.
Joe, they have not played their ranked opponent to this point right now.
They're
anywhere else.
Actually, wait, that's not true. They played Louisville. Louisville's a ranked opponent. Louisville's now ranked
right now.
They're ranked
again, so they're back in.
Yes, I'm quite certain that they're in the
top ranked opponent, a top 24 opponent.
That's more than some other teams could say.
Name one.
I don't think Pitt's ranked anymore. SMU played BYU.
Okay, this isn't I'm not putting Miami in the top 10. Name a top 10 team that you have up there that has the quality strength of schedule. And you're letting a team that was 109th in the country do that. Why are we getting to this now? But 109th. All right,
let's save it for the segment.
All I'm going to say is this Duke team was 109th in the country in total offense, and they scored 31 on you.
Those numbers aren't incorrect, and I'm not arguing that.
I'll
save what I'm talking about later.
All right. You better be glad. They better be glad they have Cam Ward. That's all I'm going to tell you. By the way, Cam Ward to the New Orleans Saints. You heard it here first. All right.
He's not going to be available. He's not going to be on the board. He's going to get picked before that.
At number 1?
Saints don't have the number 1 overall pick.
Saints are going to wind up having a number 1 pick. They're that bad. Oregon and they're at 2 right now. Oregon and Michigan, we'll get to that. And Joe, the chaos that is occurring in the Big 12 right now. Let me just tell you this. As we talked about all preseason, you ready? One of these Big 12 teams is going to get a 4 seed, and I'm going to be stupid pissed. I'm going to be stupid pissed for this sport.
Well, there's still a possibility that the Big 12 team that earns the seed has a good record. And honestly, arguably,
BYU.
BYU is not the fourth best team in the country. They will have a good resume if they run the table and they go undefeated. They will probably lose their first game. But I think what's been reaffirmed here is that there should not be a second Big 12 team in the conversation. Same thing with the ACC. We're going to bring that up later and talk about it. But I don't know how you can look at that conference and think that there is enough competitive high-level play happening that the second best team deserves to get into the playoff.
I have a correction here. I read the wrong stat on Duke. It wasn't 200 rushing yards. So that's my bad. So I just wanted to, I got tagged on my thing. You're right. I was wrong. That was on me. But still, they scored 31 points on you. That does not change. Okay. To your point, I agree with you on the Big 12. I'm going to be pissed. BYU's got to be the only team because, again, take the conferences out of it. SEC, Big 10. Joe, the losses don't mind. I mean, if BYU gets in, I mean, the strength of that schedule is Rudy Poo, right? Like you're going to now have to convince me that a team like Ole Miss versus Georgia this weekend, one of those teams is going to have the loss here, that you're going to have to convince me that BYU deserves, to be above them. There's no way you can do that. There's zero way. Chance that you can.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I've never disagreed with that premise that the seeding should not be automatic. You should get a playoff spot if you win your conference. That I have agreed with, but the auto buy thing should not be granted if you win the conference. No.
This is getting insane now. So we'll talk about the Big 12 and that chaos. Colorado might come out. Colorado gets it. I might be a little bit more lenient because it's Deion. All right, let's get to it. Everybody do us a favor and hit the like and share to all those groups. If you're on Facebook, to all of those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, Joe and I break down these games next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events, with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. We're back. All right. Joe, we had a top 10 matchup this weekend, Penn State versus Ohio State. Ohio State gets the victory here. Your thoughts when you saw the game and now that it's over with?
So first of all, on the Penn State side of things, before we look ahead for Ohio State, it's really lame that James Franklin can't get past the top teams in the country. When he plays top 10 teams, he has been abysmal. 1-11 versus Ohio State in his career at Penn State, 3-18 versus top 10 teams. I feel silly that I put faith in him to pull this thing out. And there were so many chances. There's so many spots where they had all the momentum. They had the opportunities to take control and to win that football game, Blake. You get a pick six. You don't come out aggressive the next time you get the ball back and try to make a statement. Unaccomplished. You have multiple red zone situations where you can't just punch the ball in and the game is essentially lost with an overcomplicated, too cute play call where you throw the ball into tight traffic in a completely covered section of the field when you should have gotten Tyler Warren the football, who's been successful as a Wildcat quarterback in the red zone before. Overly thought. Way too overly thought. And it continues to be so lame that James Franklin cannot get this job done. Part of me wonders if he does not go the route of Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley and Coach K in basketball, that he does not pursue an opportunity at another program. He has the track record of his coaching record. He has experience as a good recruiter, but has not been able to accomplish winning anything more than beating up on bad teams within the Big Ten. I really do think that this offseason, someone is going to come along and offer him a big opportunity like it happens every single offseason, and he will leave. It feels like the writing's on the wall.
All right. So here's the big thing. You were up 10. I thought they started off really good. They get the field goal and then the pick six. They're up 10. Okay. To be real with you, that is where I was like, damn, man, this might be a long day for Ohio State. But here's the thing after the pick six. You ready? This is where everything went downhill. They had two straight 3-and-outs. They had a punt. They had an INT. They had a field goal. They had a punt, and then they had a turnover on downs. So, Joe, you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight possessions with 3 points. That's where you lose the game. You can't be up 10-0 to let a team like Ohio State stay around with you. We'll talk about Ohio State in a minute, but there were so many chances that you could have put this one away. Or you could have taken a lead, or being at the 5-yard line, going in to score. But here is the most gross statistic that I think I've ever seen in my life. Joe, Tyler Warren led in rushing.
He also didn't get that many touches.
No, he got 7 total touches. Okay,
yeah.
He had 3 rushes, 4 catches. So it's not like they're not trying to get him double digit. He had a lot of targets there, Joe. I don't know what else to say outside of that. They tried to get him the football, but 3 rushes, 47 yards. Drew Aller was your second leading rusher who got sacked twice. 10 carries, 31 yards. The simple fact of how the game played out the entire time is a microcosm for how the game ends with you being on the 1-yard line and you can't get a yard with your running backs. At what point during the day did you say that, you know what, Allen and Singleton are going to be able to get one right up the gut and score? When? Because it hadn't happened all game. So if we're going to talk about this, it's not just on James Franklin here. Andy Kotelnicki knows better. So I'm very interested to find out if this was strictly on James Franklin or Andy Kotelnicki. But, Joe, here's the crazy thing. You talked about Tyler Warren. Guess who the leading receiver was in the game for Penn State? It was
Tyler Warren.
No, it was Singleton. With 6 catches and 54 yards. So after you ran the ball twice right up the gut and got stuffed like a holiday stocking and Santa Claus is coming down the chimney, what part did you think not getting 44-10 the ball by throwing the football until the last play that you're trying to get it in there? What's the logic? Like, there is no logic there. But, Joe, I got to be real with you. Ohio State, to that point, though, stood up. So I can come out here again and talk about James Franklin. I don't think he's supposed to beat Ohio State. I don't care what Blake, he was favored. No, I really don't. I don't think that they're the better team.
Well, actually, he wasn't favored. They were underdogs in this game.
Oh, I thought that Penn State was wound up favored in the game. Maybe I'm wrong there. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I'm misremembering.
I think they were 2.5-point favorite, Joe, if I'm not mistaken. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I saw it in the beginning of the week. Okay. Maybe it went down to a pick, or I don't know. It's the same old though. Regardless of who was favored, who was not favored, it's the same old James Franklin story. You can't beat the teams up top. It is what it is. And look, I've been a defender of James Franklin. I've come on this show multiple times and defended him. But Joe, you're at the 1-yard line. Joe, they're at the 1-yard line from being undefeated. They're 1 yard away from being undefeated right now. Let's call it what it is. Okay, and that to me, before we get to Ohio State, like you mentioned, to me is insane.
There's just certain coaches, Blake, and it makes sense if you think about just in general in any industry. When you've got people that are at the top, that are at the pinnacle, there's always a step above it. You might have a group of coaches, and there's plenty across the sport that we talk about often, that feast upon, dominate the mid-level to low-level opponents that they face. But when it comes to nut cutting time, when you have to square off with somebody who has more experience in these bigger games and more success in these bigger games, they know how to get that edge. They know how to motivate their guys. They know how to make in-game adjustments. Something for whatever it is. You can keep changing offensive coordinators. You can keep complaining about not having enough resources or NIL money, which is insane to say when you have an attendance of 113,000, I think was the number. You can complain about the runway at the airport. None of those things matter if you can't capably get your guys locked in. And most importantly, it all starts for me, Blake, with the pick six that they had. That is an opportunity. If you are a good football coach, one of the best football coaches in the country, like you want to claim that you are, you take advantage of that situation and you use that as a rallying point to shut down your opponent. Instead, you allow them to make corrections and fixes and to get momentum going.
In fairness, Penn State does that to everybody else besides Ohio State.
Well,
because
but that's my
USC, Joe. I mean, like,
so and that was why I thought things were going to be different this game, is because they did it against USC.
Again, to your point, it's a specific hurdle he's not overcoming. Right? It's not like they're not overcoming everybody else. You're right. When the better head coach is on the other sideline, Lane Kiffin last year, Ryan Day again this year, Jim Harbaugh, they're not winning football games. It just is what it is. Here's the thing, though, Joe, that before we get to Ohio State here, and this is kind of going into Ohio State, so however you clip the video, maybe, but it's going to both of them. However, okay, 11 plays, 58 yards, 5 minutes off the clock. That was the last drive for Ohio State. So you want to talk to me about how big and bad that defensive line is, how tough Penn State is, and all this kind of stuff too? Your offense made a massive blunder and couldn't get it in. They had the ball at the 1 yard line and literally got 58 yards on you. You couldn't stop them. That's with a beat-up O-line, by the way. Remember, that was the whole chatter coming into this, was that Ohio State, okay, down 2 left tackles. Where are they going to move Jackson out to left tackle? Like, what are they going to do? Well, Joe, the bottom line was when it came to nut cutting time, Ohio State lined it up and punched you in the mouth, and there wasn't anything that you can do about it. Third string left tackle or not, it didn't matter. They lined up and punched you when it got tough. They lined up at the end of it when they had to make the big stop. They did it, and then when they needed to get the first down over and over again. And let me just say this: you want to know? You talked about well-coached teams, unselfish football teams. Remember the second to last run by Will Howard when Quinshon Judkins absolutely almost flatlined a dude and got Will Howard the first down? Joel Klatt I thought Joel had the best call here. He was like, you know what? Watch Judkins in the hole. Bang. Joe, I get Ohio State is getting passed by 7 here in a game like this, but here's the God's honest truth. That's unselfish football. That's how you win football games. And regardless of what you want to say about Penn State, the truth is one team took it from you and the other one couldn't do it. And I thought that was the microcosm of the entire game.
So I know that it's certainly easy for us to like really focus on the downfall for James Franklin, because it is certainly a very, very big talking point. But you bring up the most important thing that I think is getting really swept away by a storyline that returns every single year and that we hyper fixate on, which is talking about James. It's literally the same headline. James Franklin loses to Ohio State. James Franklin loses to Michigan. We're wasting too much time talking about that. We need to talk about what you just said, which is a lot of people thought the game was over. Will Howard pick 6. He throws a ball where he broadcasted it to the entire stadium. Before he threw the ball, I literally was watching it unfold of Jeremiah Smith's about to cut inside and this defensive back is about to step up. Like, you could literally see where Will Howard was trying to go with that football as he was releasing it and before everything really started to unfold. They were able to, for what you just talked about, to be in a bad position where your offensive line has been incredibly battered and banged up, and you're able to make adjustments. And they didn't play great. They gave up some big plays to Abdul Carter, but Chip Kelly was able to call an effective enough of a game in order to get themselves out of some certain difficult situations on various drives in order to finish some of those drives. So I give Ohio State a ton of credit, Blake, for the most important part here. Joel, they have established themselves as Big Ten championship contenders. I don't think anyone should have taken them out of that conversation. They can step up to the plate when the challenge is presented to them.
What are we trying to separate Ohio State at the current moment? A 1-point loss on the road? I mean, let's just say.
Well, I think a lot of people that were, and I think plenty of people were doing this, was that the bad game that they had against Nebraska and the injuries, there was a little bit of a pullback of like maybe something bad could happen here.
Okay. Does every team not get one of those?
No, I don't think necessarily every team.
Oh, every team in this year has had one of those type of games. Everybody. There's not one. Because even the number one team in the country is a field goal away from losing against Boise State. So
it was a more specific example of like the bad game against Nebraska was heightened the whole offensive line conversation.
Okay. Doesn't matter. Great teams find ways to win. Yeah. We talk about that all the time. All the talk about Quinshon Judkins coming out of the offseason. Unselfish players don't make blocks like that. They don't. I'm sorry, they don't. And you can say, well, Blake, there's a whole bunch of other games. There was. Joe, I got to be real with you. Okay? Like, I thought that they probably got away from running the football a little too much, if I'm being real with you. I mean, Judkins, 95 yards. Henderson, 54 yards. I know that Howard got in the mix there. I got to be real with you, though. There was a part of me that's like, run the football. Like, continue to run the ball. I know that your concern was about this offensive line and things that were going on. Joe, this could have been worse than what it actually was. I know that, like, I thought play calling was actually bad by Chip in some instances. Like, it's 3rd and 3, you throw the football, you got a punt, and I'm like, oh, man, you just had a 7-yard run on 2nd down. Like, why aren't you lining up and running it? You know, maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm being too nitpicky here. But a tough, hard-fought win. Joe, we worried about them running the football, and they ran for 176 yards. I mean, they did it against what is still a really good front. I mean, Quinshon Judkins finally, I thought had a big bust-out game against a good opponent. Now, he didn't get in the end zone, but I don't think that matters. But, look, man, I thought – look, they are dangerous everywhere. Injuries or no injuries offensively. They are dangerous. And it's a great win by Ohio State, man.
It's huge. And to reiterate what I was saying, they're winning
in multiple ways. Sorry. They're winning in multiple ways.
It reestablishes the momentum that it felt like they were slowly starting to lose. I think that we need to push past any of those worries about their offensive line. And that was a fair question to ask last week, is like, would the offensive line problems catch up to them in any way? And I don't think that it will. I think that if they play a team like Oregon or somebody else that's got a really good defensive line in the playoff, maybe that's what holds them from winning a national championship. But it's
very true.
1,000 on the table for them to win the Big Ten championship game.
Joe, when we did picks on Wednesday, what was the reason for me picking Ohio State? Do you remember?
What did you say? I forget what it was.
I said, I know that I have a lot of concerns about Ohio State, especially what's going on along their offensive line. But the bottom line of why I picked them on Wednesday was simple. You have two brilliant offensive minds in Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. And I do think that
that's what the difference was.
It's what the difference was. So it's why you need to – oh, by the way, somebody's got a 5-game lead on our pickups.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
Oh, it's me. Just throwing it out there. Your boy went 3-0 against you. All right. Speaking of a game neither one of us picked, but we probably should have. Texas A&M goes into Columbia, South Carolina, Joe, in what was an excellent environment in Williams-Brice Stadium. Shane Beamer and company come away with the victory, blanking Texas A&M in the second half to no points. Your thoughts on the game? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, roommate came in through the door, so I was trying to mute myself. What I meant to say is I certainly have to give credit to South Carolina for the defensive performance that they put up, the run game performance that they had as well with Raheem Sanders and Lenore Sellers. I mean, they ran all over that Texas A&M defense. And South Carolina fans can get annoyed with me for focusing on Texas A&M. The talking point here has to be on Texas A&M. I didn't really get why Marcel Reed in the third quarter clearly was struggling and they couldn't find any ways to like really maintain any drives. Why they wouldn't try to bring in Connor Wigman.
He looked picked out.
He did, and that's a problem that's where this is at right now. And I brought this up last week. They potentially had an opportunity to have the ability to turn to different guys based on what was working. And it felt like if you threw Connor Wigman in there when they were playing so aggressively downhill and they were loading the box and they were just overemphasizing trying to stop the run, that if you brought in Wigman and you took some shots, you might have been able to reestablish energy. Marcel Reed does not have an arm big enough to really take the shots necessary to what could stress South Carolina's defense. And that's what helped Alabama and what helped LSU and Ole Miss win those games against South Carolina was being more aggressive downfield. They almost fell for this South Carolina trap. Separate from that, Blake, it played into kind of what we talked about, where eventually a first-year head coach at a new program, when he steps in, they can have all the success that they want, but they're always bound to have a bad game. There's always going to be a misstep. There's always going to be that bad performance. And here it was on the road against South Carolina in one of the hardest, most underrated road environments to play in.
I know I had fun with this one, but I'm going to keep this one serious because the pettiness that goes on between me and A&M media doesn't really matter about what actually goes on in these games here. But let me just say this to the A&M media. I enjoyed every second of it because you come after the Bulls, sometimes you get the horns. Joe, I'm not going to get in this debate with you. I think that's I'm not doing it. South Carolina defensive front and front seven is insane. I've been talking about them all year.
I don't disagree with that. I just think to crown them as the number one is
okay. I'm not getting Joe. I literally said twice. I'm not getting into this debate with you.
Okay.
Right. Regardless if they are, if they're not, they are in every football game and have been in every football game because of what they have in the front seven. Dabo, the edge guys, and to be real with you, what nobody wants to talk about, what the real threat has been is what they have at defensive tackle has really propelled them in moments, like it did last night. How are you having a one-tech, Joe, break a double team and sack Marcel Reed? Nobody had over 2 sacks in this game, by the way. All 6 sacks came from 7 different players because 2 guys had a half a sack. 7 different guys got in on the action and got sacks. That's the difference in South Carolina. Hey, Joe, I got to be real with you. In the second half, we talked about how bad that offensive line has been at times for South Carolina. A&M didn't get a sack. So we talked about one defensive line being really good, or both of them being really good. A&M's got blanked by a team that was 130th in the country in sacks. You brought it up earlier this week. They give up too many sacks. Well, the truth of it is, to add into that, they were getting there too. Lenore Sellers is a freak show when he wants to be. Joe, all the tackles that he broke, extending the run, his escapability for runs on first down and throws. Remember the first down run that he had when he just launched himself at a guy and runs a dude over for a first down? He went full Street Fighter in the 90s, Joe. He went Hayuget and went head first into an A&M defender. Here's the truth. One team wanted it more last night, and I could tell. One team desperate. I could tell what team came off an emotional win the week before and which team came out of a bye week. You know, Joe, when we talked about this game, we talked about, hey, when Beamer came off a bye week against Ole Miss, they looked like dog manure. And I was like, Joe, but what's the chances of them and the team with a good defense like that doing it again? Joe, they weren't flat. They were popping A&M in the mouth all night. So you can call this, you can say that, you can talk about culture, you can talk about toughness, whatever you want to talk about. At the end of the day, one team wanted that game more, and I could see it at quarterback. Lenore Sellers put his body on the line for this game, and I thought that he was the real MVP. I know the D-line is going to get a lot of praise, and they blanked A&M in the second half. But Lenore Sellers, in his heart, Joe, nothing he did was special in the sense of that he played with tons and tons of heart, and it won them a football game.
Well, and on the flip side of that, emotional game the last week, and to not stay focused the following week, it's been a recurring trend this season and in the history of college football, obviously, but this season it's been something that we've talked about a lot. And as much as, yes, Raheem Sanders and Lenore Sellers deserve credit for the big plays that they had, Elko mentioned this after the game, talked about this after the game. They have to finish tackles. Like they have to finish tackles. They were going up against 2 very big body players that they needed to tackle against. It all came down to that. Like literally, there were so many plays where what you just talked about, they were getting penetration. They were getting home, and they just weren't finishing those plays because they weren't playing with intent and the necessary energy in order to have the big defensive performance. That, I would argue, was the biggest swaying point. Is because if Texas A&M finishes those plays early and gets those sacks, gets those tackles for loss, gets those stops near the line of scrimmage, then things can start to turn back in their direction. But instead, South Carolina started making those plays. South Carolina started getting the big chunk plays, and it just wore them down. Texas A&M, I don't want to say that like things are donezo for them. This still is a very good team, but they need to freaking figure out what the hell is their direction at quarterback. I think a lot of people last week were very quick to just immediately go, boom, Marcel Reed, he's the guy. He's leading the team. I don't think that answer has been resolved. And I think that there is still going to be time in these remaining games until they play Texas that they need to make a firm decision and know who best sets them up to win football games.
To your point, I mean, it's not like you're just claiming it now. You were claiming that during the week before this game even kicked off.
Yeah.
So I'll give you that. Joe, 286 rushing yards. You're not going to win many football games when you allow that.
No.
Now, I get a lot of that as sellers breaking a pocket and getting away from stuff, but that's the point. You talk about tackling. Yeah, you're right. But here's more than tackling. Joe, how many tackles around the legs and around the hips did sellers break? It's not like that they're not unfundamentally sound, right? Like he's bouncing off their legs. He's bouncing off. He's spin moving. It was
a lot of arm tackles. I mean, we got to call it how it is. There were a lot of arm tackles.
There was one on his last scramble. He got hit twice in the knees and did 2 spin moves off of it. I mean, like I get what you're saying. He's getting hit in the knees though. Like, I mean, this isn't Saquon Barkley in this thing. By the way, you see Saquon's crazy move today. He did how you get 2? One team came off a bye week and wanted it more. It was a tough place to be in. That environment in Williams-Brice, by the way, Joe, that is as electric of a place that you can get at night. I mean, that's why. That's why that kind of stuff matters. I think it comes down to one thing. I'm not going to give up on Marcel Reed in reference to that. Joe, I know that they got blanked in the second half, but a lot of bad things happen in reference to penalties too, right? Shamar Turner, if he gets another personal foul, Joe, in a critical situation, he's got to. I know he's talented. He's got to see the bench. I get the pregame antics last week. Okay, the personal fouls last week, the personal fouls this week. You were off the field. By the way, you were down 7 and he committed a personal foul, and it gave South Carolina momentum, and they went down and scored on you again. So you can't have stuff like that either.
And they had a ton of penalties in this game, just to finalize that point. There are a lot of bad dumb
penalties for 86 yards or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was bad. Very bad.
Very bad. Here's the thing, though, Joe. A&M had to lose 2 SEC games down this stretch. And, I mean, who are you? Are you a contender or are you a pretender? Because coming into the month of November, you led the SEC standings. Now what are you going to do? Now that Texas game is even bigger, do you slip up in any of these games? Before then, do you have another hard road game? I don't know. But I just felt like, and to South Carolina's point too here a little bit, okay, a team had been there before too, over and over again. It was only a matter of time, Joe, before South Carolina got one of these. You can only be in so many matchups against top 10 opponents that are that close before you win one. Like, I mean, it was inevitable. It was inevitable.
Yes and no, because sometimes there's plenty of coaches who just keep losing those close games, and then it leads to their firings. I mean, like Scott Frost.
You mean James Franklin?
Well, no, that's not the example I'm going for. Like Scott Frost didn't have
Scott Frost though. I mean, come on.
Yeah, Scott Frost wasn't playing. I know he wasn't playing top ranked SEC teams, but he's like the first example I can think of. Like his last year before he got fired, they lost like a ridiculous amount of one-score games,
21 one-score games or something ridiculous like that.
But Texas A&M, to the point you just brought up, they've got New Mexico State. They have a bye. They've got New Mexico State. They've got Auburn, and then they finish up with Texas. So there's no reason why they shouldn't move through this smoothly to that Texas game. And getting Texas at home is going to be an advantage. That is going to be a play-in for the SEC championship game.
Yeah. I mean, very likely could, unless, I don't know Texas schedule, unless they slip up. Sellers' escapability. We didn't talk about Rocket Sanders enough in this. He got a lot of tough yards. He looks like he was 100%. He looked fantastic. And a tight end in Simon, 4 catches, 130-plus yards, and 2 touchdowns. You cannot allow that to continue to happen if you're A&M. All right. Joe, let's move to Georgia, Florida here. The largest cocktail party is a final here. Joe, 3 minutes left to go in the game. Florida is down 7. And they throw an interception. And I think what people are going to do here is look at the game. It's like, okay, 34-20. It's a rivalry game. No. 3 minutes left to go. Florida's got the ball down 7 and on a drive. Okay, but then a pick really kills it, and that's the ball game. It's not indicative of how close this game was. But I got to say something to Georgia fans. We talk about Georgia a lot. A lot of the Georgia people listen and watch our show, Joe. They are always in here. And they know I love them. We got to have a heart-to-heart conversation. You're not winning jack shit if Carson Beck keeps throwing 3 interceptions per game. It's just not going to happen. So I want to make this very well known. I see a lot, Joe, during Georgia games about Mike Bobo. A lot. And I'm about sick of it. If you really think that 2 times that Carson Beck got picked off and both of them are in triple coverage, you literally have the telecast. Hold on. You have Herbstreit on the telecast saying, where is he throwing this? And it's into triple coverage twice. So I don't really necessarily – Joe, regardless of what the play call is, regardless, okay, you cannot turn the ball over. If your O-line is bad, if your run game's bad, if your receivers suck, and your OC sucks, even if all of that is true, the number 1 rule at quarterback is to not turn the ball over. So here's the silver lining that – hold on, you're going to let me finish here. Here's the flip side.
I wasn't going to cut you off.
Okay.
You cut yourself off.
Well, I see you talking or about to talk.
I didn't know. No words came out of my mouth. I was letting you finish.
Here's the flip side of that coin. Joe, what would they be doing to teams if they're not turning the ball over the way that they are? That's the real question.
It's a very good point, and it's something that we've talked about with a couple of top teams, and Georgia could be completely walloping some of their opponents if they were able to finish and not have these turnovers. Look, 11 interceptions in the last 5 games. The criticism towards Carson Beck, it's warranted. He does need to make better decisions. But I keep coming back to, and I think to extrapolate on the thought that people keep complaining about with Mike Bobo, I'm one of these people who keeps complaining about Mike Bobo. The problem is, I brought this up in the preseason. I've brought this up over multiple games where he's played poorly. Carson Beck is not in that upper category of quarterback that can just muster up a win for his team, that can go and scramble and make the big play, use his arm to dice up a defense, drive the ball through a tight window. He's not that type of a guy. He is a great in-game manager, like we've seen so many other Georgia quarterbacks be, where the offense, and under Monken, they were great at this. The offense was super balanced, and it flowed very evenly. But for some reason, since the start of this year, they didn't do this last year. I get it, they had Brock Bowers and Lam McConkey, but since the start of this year, they have tried to use Carson Beck in a manner that I don't think best suits him. They're trying to make this kid play hero ball. They're throwing the ball and setting him up in too many early down situations to throw the ball and to be aggressive downfield. He's not that type of a guy. I'd love to know what the play action percentage of times that they call play action during these drives.
It sounds like you're defending Carson Beck, if I'm being honest.
I am defending Carson Beck. 40 passing attempts compared to the 32 rushing attempps that you had in this game.
But
you were going up against one of the worst run defenses in the country that we talked about. And that was what we talked about in the preview. Run the damn ball.
Okay. However, that does not excuse 6 interceptions in their last 2 games.
I'm not excusing the interceptions, but Bobo needs to stop setting him up in these situations for him to make dumb decisions.
I'm sorry. Here's the fundamental truth. The fundamental truth about this, regardless of the play calling, beyond the play calling, you have to know that when you're running a drag route against cover 3, which is where the pick came from, him throwing the double post, the post that's in front of the other post that's behind it, That is Joe. That is the last place you throw the football. So
I'm not disagreeing with the decision making. It's bad decision making.
Drag route. So the bottom line is, I'm with you on running the football. I'm not saying that Bobo has no. What's the word I'm looking for here? He has no blame. Okay, but there's got to come a point where when these quarterbacks are making these many mistakes, like, come on.
But that's my whole point, is that if you have a guy who has such a high propensity to make these mistakes, why are you not trying everything in your power to take a lot less of that pressure off of his shoulders? It's not like we're watching games. There's plenty of quarterbacks like Kate Klubnik, which we're going to get to. He had a bajillion passing attempts because they were behind and they had to get back in the football game.
So what they're not saying.
Let me finish. You're not wrong. Let me finish what I'm trying to say here. It's not like he's getting all these passing attempts because they're down and they got to climb back into games. They're throwing the ball early in drives, on first down, on second down, when they need to try to run the ball more. Again, they went against one of the worst run defenses in the country, one of the worst in the SEC. Why were you not trying to? Tate Radledge came back. I get that when you have early downs where you can't find success running the football, but completely bailing on it, it's bad coaching. It's bad decision-making. You're not wrong for criticizing Carson Beck for making the wrong decisions. He needs to be better. He 1,000% needs to be better. But Bobo needs to be far better in his decision-making to set up the kid to be a more successful playmaker.
Bobo either. That also goes down to Kirby. So if you're going to blame Bobo, then you got to blame Kirby just as much for allowing them to continue to do that. So there's clearly something that both of them are seeing, that why they're doing what they're doing. Clearly. This isn't just you cannot convince me that they're sitting in a meeting and Kirby doesn't say, hey, Bobo, you need to dial it back some because we need to run the football. And Bobo's just like, screw you, I'm not doing that. There's something that they're seeing, Joe. I mean, it's just not happening that way. Regardless of everything that you're saying, I am never going to excuse QB play where you have that many turnovers. Joe, nobody gets coddled more than quarterbacks. And when they start making critical, and I'm talking about absolutely critical errors, he just can't do that. That's the bottom line. They are not going to go where they need to go until he starts eliminating turnovers. And you know that deep down. Secondly, I think Billy Napier called his best game. And where I look at Georgia is, look, defensively, I know that Lagway went out. They got a turnover. They hit a big play on you. I really think that we'd be talking more about this defense if they just weren't turning the ball over the way that they are. Legitimately. This defense, the last two games that we've seen, has been insanely good. Now, did Florida run on them a little bit? Yeah. And I thought Billy called the best game that he had at Florida since that Utah win that he had in his first ever game there. It was a great called game by Billy. And it's a rivalry game, and things were really well. But the God's honest truth is your defense gave you so many stops and so many big plays that this one should have been over by midway through the third. That's just the God's honest truth. That defense is serious, and we're not talking about them enough.
That's fair, and I think giving Billy Napier some props for
it was a really well-called game, man. Some of the stuff he was doing was really good, really nice.
If Lagway didn't go down, I do kind of wonder. I think a lot of people have said this today. I mean, I do really wonder what could have happened because, I mean, Lagway was playing out of his mind. And some of these throws that he was having and some of these connections and, talk about you get a pick, you get the ball, and you're aggressive and you take a shot. The opposite of what James Franklin did of just really going at the neck of your opponent when you have a chance to completely take him out. That's what Billy Napier did. I got to give him credit for doing that. But, I mean, it's sad to say this, Blake, but talking about Billy Napier and giving him credit, it almost feels like it's just it feels a little useless, does it not? Because we don't know what his future is going to hold. And
I'm going to give a man credit where credit's due.
Yeah, he deserves the credit, but like, do you think that there's any way that he saved himself any
he's
time
be
here?
One of these games with a backup preferred walk on. I mean, he's got to go to a ball game, Joe. I mean, that's just I don't. I think I've said it religiously. They got to move on from Billy. But the bottom line is, Joe, I'm not going to be the guy that constantly comes up here and just beats down on somebody over and over and over and over again. And then when he does fantastic play, fantastic game, then I'm not going to sit here and not recognize it. But look, Joe, those 3 turnovers are abysmal, man. I'm sorry. I can't. Joe, everything that everybody's saying about I don't know, all the turnovers that Quinn Ewers gets or Garrett Nussmeier had last week against A&M, regardless of who it is. Like, I think his defense is playing better than what we're giving that defense credit for because of all of it. So
that's fair.
They got a game against Ole Miss this week, and I promise you, you better not do that. You better not throw those 3 picks because they're good enough defensively to stop them, Joe. Okay. You're going to find out. You're going to find out. So you got to start eliminating the turnovers here. All right. You want to go Clemson or Miami?
Oh, let's get to Miami. Let's get to Miami.
Miami over Duke, another ACC game, highly scored here. Joe, your thoughts on Miami over Duke?
Okay, let's see how quickly we can go without yelling at each other. I keep coming back to this, and I stand by this. This Miami team reminds me a lot. It's not a full one-on-one comparison of Washington last year. There were tons of games and tons of situations where it felt like they were out of it. They were going to lose. They weren't playing their best ball. Their offense was so potent that they could pull themselves back up into any situation and then completely flip it on their opponent and dominate them. That's what they did against Duke. Is their secondary inconsistent and are they giving up a lot of big plays? Yes, that is a concern. It's something that's going to cost them in their hardest matchups in the future. I don't think, though, based on what we've seen in ACC play, that any of these ACC teams are going to challenge Miami. I don't think Clemson or SMU are going to present enough of a challenge to knock them off in the ACC championship game. And I think that this Miami offense is good enough to go on a run and to win multiple games in the playoff. Yes, again, to reiterate, their defense will hurt them at some point. It will cost them a football game, but I don't think it's going to be any time in the near future. Cam Ward is one of the most gifted and exciting quarterbacks that I've ever had the opportunity to watch. He can make so many plays that only 1% of quarterbacks, maybe 0.1% of quarterbacks that have played the game are capable of doing, where he can improvise, he can make throws. He still makes some crazy bad decisions at times, like the one pick that he threw, but he dices up any defense when he's given the opportunity to do so. When your offense is the best in the country, Blake, you don't always need an elite defense to pair with it. If you're just straight up outscoring teams and you're playing 3-point basketball, it freaking works.
This isn't 3-point basketball, though.
Because
as good as those Warrior teams were, they had a really good defense, too, that you can't ignore. So if you want to call it like that,
I don't compare them to the Warriors. I'm just saying it's like a team that takes a lot of threes.
Team, who do you think about?
I do think about the Warriors, but I don't compare them to the Warriors.
And hush.
It's a broad statement.
Okay, here's what I'd say. I agree with you massively offensively. They're the number one offense in the country. It's not remotely close. Restrepo's insane. I still think they need to run the ball more. I mean,
they have success when they do it.
They have a lot of success when they do it. And here's the thing. If you're going to continue to allow explosive plays, like if that's what you're going to do, Joe, at some point you got to ice things. It's tough when you have a guy like Cam Ward who throws for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. But here's the thing, Joe. Both quarterbacks in this game went 25-41. Both had over 3 touchdowns. You expect it from Cam Ward. You have no reason to expect it from Malik Murphy. 0. Now, he threw 3 picks in there. It's what ultimately got Duke beat. Okay? Those 3 interceptions were horrifying. But the bottom line is they are allowing, regardless of when it clips them, if it clips them, whatever. One thing that is a very glaring weakness. Joe, you had 109th offense in the country in Duke coming in here. And we said in the pregame of this that Duke's just not the team that's going to be able to get explosive plays on you. They can't do it against anybody. Why are they going to do it against you? And they did. Over and over and over again. And I told you that this corner room continues to get lost in man coverage. You're right. Probably going to win the ACC. I picked them to win the ACC too. Pick Cam to win the Heisman. Joe Hagan had 9 catches, 135 yards, and a touchdown. There's going to be teams that you play that have better quarterbacks and better receivers than this. They're going to dice you up. I'm sorry. As much as you – again – I
just don't think that matters. I understand what you're saying, too. I just don't think that matters.
Get past the playoff or get past the ACC for a minute, get in the playoffs. You get paired up with the right team, you're going down.
Okay, well, let me ask you – wait, hold on. Let me ask you this, though. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot with this question, but, like, out of the quarterback play to this year has been down. Of the teams that are prospectively going to play in the playoff, how many quarterbacks actually scare you? I can only think of 5. I don't think there's very
Cam
many
Ward
that are.
definitely would scare me. Cam Ward definitely scares me.
No,
Again,
but I'm saying if Miami played against some of these teams, like I don't think that there's very many explosive offenses in the field.
Let me give you this, okay? Think of the teams that Miami have played right now, and you're talking about the teams that would be in the top 12. All of them can be dangerous more than these teams that Miami's sticking around with. Miami fans can stay pissed off at me. You can be mad at me all you want to, and that is okay. You can outscore teams. Go right on ahead and try to do it. But there's going to be a team that, Joe, you only have four, okay, power conference champs, and you're going to be one of them. Think of all the teams. Let's just say hypothetically Georgia, who we just got done talking about. Georgia, you can't do that to them. You can't do that. I'm going to be real with you. You can't allow Nico Iamaleava to have explosive plays on you with that running game. You can't allow, Joe, Ohio State or Oregon, one of those teams are going to be in there and going to get matched up with them. It is a bona fide fact. And if you got Megatron Jr. and Megatron Sr. along with what we're going to talk about Oregon next year, Joe, again, at some point, this is going to clip you. All those quarterbacks and all those teams I just named, they are better than this passing attack. They are better than Malik Murphy. So the bottom line is this is yet another game. Hold on, pause. I got absolutely abused by Miami fans all week saying that your massive problem is allowing teams to stay around and that your secondary is getting lost in coverage. It happened yet again. What about Florida State?
Yeah,
They're
but okay.
1-8.
But I think that part of the pushback and the reason why I'm pushing back against you is they're acknowledging that that's an issue. It is an issue.
No,
but I don't think that it is.
Acknowledge that to me. What they acknowledged is that you're a hater, you're a bum, you don't like Miami, even though I picked them to win the ACC. But I know one thing that's true. One thing that's true is we've seen college football teams constructed like this. We have.
But that's my whole point is that, again, we literally have an example from last year. I understand that you want to point out that they lost in the national championship
I can
game,
name 20 other years.
Washington outscored Texas in the Sugar Bowl and went on to the national championship game. They outscored Oregon twice when they played squared off with them. They outscored USC, which had a prolific offense. They were able to just outmuster them. They were able to put up more points on the board if they had to.
Okay. I remember, let's take it out of Washington's hands for a moment. I'm going to go to the greatest of all time. You know what Nick's later teams had issues with?
What?
They were almost in the hundreds to the 120s in explosive play rate defensively. At some point, there was going to be a team that would clip them. And it continued to happen, which nobody wants to talk about with Nick. Again, I am conceding the massive fact that there is nobody that's there that's going to challenge him. But God forbid the day that Cam Ward is off or this offense is off. It's coming. Because I
just think you're pitching a lot of hypotheticals here. I mean, like they just keep proving that notion wrong.
Joe, it was a 7-point game with 7 minutes left to go?
But then how much did they win? Okay. Okay. I get it's important to bring that up. Sure. But how absurd is it for them to have won by how much they did, despite them being down as much as they were and also being a 7-point game?
Did not have an answer. And Duke is not the team that's going to have an answer. They're Duke.
You said this earlier on in the game, in the show. Good teams find ways to win when they're not playing good. We say that all the time on this program. Like we can't give Miami credit for doing that. They played a shitty second quarter and they bounced back.
About Ohio State. Ohio State played a top 5 ranked team.
We also say that about teams on this show when they play bad teams and they bounce back and they finish. Like we said that again about Georgia. When Georgia played Kentucky, we talked about how even though that they played like shit, they still found a way to win and they finished off the game. I think that Miami deserves credit for that.
Again, though, who is the level of opponent?
They still won by over 20 points.
Fair. All right. How did our TCU and Washington takes when me and you talked about them? How did it wind up ending for? Hold on. Just tell me the truth. How did it end up for both of those teams?
I was correct in saying that they were good enough to reach the national championship games.
Okay.
I was overly ambitious in stating that they could win it, and I was stupid for doing so.
Okay. So again, to the
I'm not
point,
saying they win the national title. I think that they can get to the
until
quarterfinal.
Miami can show that they can be a complimentary football team. At any given moment, they're on upset alert for me. I'm sorry. There's going to be a team you're going to be down offensively in the game. Joe, this one.
They've done they literally have done that stuff. They played like shit against Cal and then and Virginia Tech. They played awful for 3 quarters and then they put together some ridiculous comebacks.
Joe, name a conference outside the ACC that they could do this in and get away with it.
That doesn't have anything to do with
what I'm serious. Name the conference they could do this in.
They're playing in the ACC, so that doesn't matter.
Right. Name the conference. I'm asking you. Name a conference that they could be in outside of the ACC that they could get away with this.
I'm not answering that because we're not talking about other conferences.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, you don't want to concede the point, but if you could they do this in the Big Ten?
Yes, with how bad some of the
could they do this in the SEC?
No, they couldn't do this in the SEC. No team could do this in the SEC.
So again, when you're going up against Duke, Joe, how many teams in the SEC and the Big Ten would love to play Duke right now?
Duke is not that bad of a football team.
You literally, how dare you? You literally came out here last Tuesday and talked about how they are a fugazi football team and they're so
no.
Do you want me to pull up the Wednesday show? You legitimately said that they were horrible offensively. And the fact
they were. Okay, wait. Coming into it statistically, I said that they weren't very good offensively, but I didn't come in here saying that they were some shit level team. They have a winning record, which is competitive performances that they have put together. All my take was with Duke is that they were not good enough to be the team that beat Miami, to upset them, and that was true. All right, we got Oregon to talk about. Let's start. We're circling the same argument.
Lost your godforsaken mind.
Washington got me a nice following when I supported them, and the Miami fans love me. And I think my take is apt, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. Same with the Oregon fans.
You're doing it for fans. That's all you're doing.
No, I'm not.
Danny Cannell of the Ruffino and Joe show.
But it's not that, because I leaned into the take because I had faith in it, and that was why that fan base liked me. And now Miami's doing the same thing.
Didn't they hate you a year ago?
They did, and now they love me. This is how this works.
Miami, didn't you hate the Miami fans?
I didn't. They hated me. Don't try to turn this. Don't try to turn this.
I remember when you hated them because they were after you had Tyler Van Dyke.
I didn't like Tyler Van Dyke. That was more specific.
Okay. Oregon takes down Michigan. Joe, your thoughts on the game?
We were reminded again. The same talking point happens with Oregon every single week, Blake, that they face off with a mid to low level Big Ten team. They're waxing everybody. They're smoking everybody. This was a game where every single drive, every single quarter, you just knew that Oregon had control of the football game. There wasn't a second that you watched this where you thought, is Michigan going to pull this thing out? No. Same thing with Illinois the week prior. They are at their highest point, and they are continuing to get better every single week. Dylan Gabriel had one of his least efficient games of the year, which is crazy to say because he still threw for 294 yards. He had a long, nice rushing touchdown where he had a wide open lane, and we forget sometimes how good of an athlete he is. Jordan James, big game, 117 yards as well. It is easy to continue to lean on Oregon, and I'll repeat the same statement from last week, Blake. They are the most balanced, complete team in college football right now. Every single position group on this team, minus the injury that they just suffered to Tez Johnson, every single position group is at an average to above average level. We can't say the same thing with Ohio State. We can't say the same thing with Georgia. We can't say the same thing with Texas. their ability to play consistent, balanced football will push them as far as they can take themselves.
And look, to the point that you're making about they're the most balanced team, I don't disagree with that, but they're definitely the most balanced offensive team right now. Meaning, when they threw the fade route, the absolute dime of a throw that Dylan Gabriel put on Evan Stewart, okay, the only touchdown throwing that he had in the game, Joe, they loaded the box. Michigan loaded the box and said, we're going to give you man-on-man coverage and see what you're going to do with it, and they scored. I mean, they decided in the second half to not let Dylan beat him through the air and score. They ran all over him. I mean, they're just a really well-coached, well-put-together team. They were 10 for 15 on third down. They dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides. I mean, the only blunder I would say that they had was the punt return that got fumbled, then Michigan scored a touchdown, I guess. But, man, they're just so dynamic in everything that they do. I will say this, just to throw it out there. I did think Michigan ran the ball efficiently in some areas. Edwards had 52 yards. Orji had 52 yards. But at some point, I'm just like, yeah, okay. I mean, that's what Michigan does, though, man. I mean, they dominated throughout the game in every single facet and every single level. And this Oregon team's just on another level right now, Joe.
A completely other level. And I honestly, I feel like a lot of folks, I mean, there's certainly plenty of people giving them love, but Oregon has been a little bit on the outside, I think, of the national perspective because of all these other big games that have been happening. They haven't had a premier game since the Ohio State game. They need to be talked about more. They need to be recognized more of why they're the number one team. And right now, plainly, I think that when I do my power rankings this week, I'm going to move them back up to number one, especially with the way that Ohio State played. It kind of makes me reconsider. I was too low on Ohio State, that they deserve to move up, and it re-solidifies how great of a win that was over Ohio State. There's no reason to doubt this Oregon team, and the only thing that catches up to them. Actually, wait, here's one thing I want to bring up before we move on, and maybe we talk about the next game. We spoke at the beginning of this show about James Franklin and those inabilities to win big games. And our biggest talking point at the beginning of this season with Dan Lanning was, is he going to be able to get the job done? Is he going to be able to win the big games? Is he going to be able to finish the season? They haven't faltered. You know, they haven't had that low light game since the big high that they had. James Franklin, other coaches that can't get over that hump can't say the same thing. It really does feel like Dan Lanning is starting to ascend in that upper category of coaches. And who knows how the season's going to finish. Maybe they do win a national championship. Maybe they do win the Big Ten championship game. If that's what he needs to get in that upper category, it at least feels like he's getting closer and closer to it.
Georgia West without the turnovers.
Yeah.
I mean, they're Georgia West. They're Georgia West without the turnovers. What are they doing? I mean, I don't think Kirby doesn't want to run the football. You know, like recruiting, dominating both lines of scrimmage, experienced quarterback leading them to where they need to go. Good enough play callers. Like, hey, bro, are you going to play man-to-man coverage on Evan Stewart? Good luck. Here comes a fade route, touchdown, bang. I mean, like Joe, there's nothing that you can walk away with them right now and not say that's impressive. All right, yeah. Like that's really nice. So Oregon gets a big win. You're right. I think not a lot of people are talking about them. I mean, you got bigger games on, but you had a lot of big games on, ranked versus ranked matchups. So you're right. I get what you're saying, but I mean, I was watching them. I mean, the throw to Evan Stewart was insane. I don't care what anybody tells.
Great ball.
Gabriel. All right, Clemson. Joe falls to Louisville here. Your thoughts on Clemson falling to the Cardinals?
Oh, Ruffino and Joe Show fans know one thing, Blake. They know that any opportunity I get to hate on Dabo, I am going to gladly take it, Blake. Oh. This was a lame game from our guy, Dabo Sweeney at Clemson. You were at home. You were against a Louisville team that you were supposed to be bigger and stronger and tougher than on both lines. And what happens? You get ran all over by a freshman running back. Isaac Brown, 151 yards, Dabo. What happened? And when you were kind of climbing back into it, you give up a 45-yard rushing touchdown to the young man. Great game by Isaac Brown, by the way, Blake. But this continues to play into the narrative I had this offseason. Dabo is done. I don't care if anyone wants to defend him. They built their resume this season. And I admit I was giving him a little props, and I shouldn't have. They built their resume beating the crap out of a bunch of weak-ass teams. NC State and UVA, congratulations, Dabo. Those are really, really nice wins, man. But they can't get back to that upper echelon. We were reminding that of that in this game. This is a situation where they should have dominated, Blake, and it's so whack. It's so lame that they played the way that they did.
Louisville just bullied them. 222 rushing yards. Tyler Shuck had the spinner Rooney flip off in the air and then scored a touchdown. Joe, here's what I don't want to say. They moved the football in Louisville and then catastrophically failed on third down. The problem is they had two massive block field goals, did Louisville, okay? Which was I want
to talk about one of those in a second, but
which was a massive issue. The 3rd and 7 twice, Joe, twice. This defense held them on third down and had massive penalties, which I'm not trying to stick up for Dabo. How are you calling PI on that? Like, how is it defensive PI on one of the 3rd and 7 calls? But regardless, this is not the only one. Even if you erase that, you gave up 2 other 3rd and 7 calls, Joe, where you had a whole defensive backs that were holding. I mean, it gave Louisville first downs. They went down and scored on both of them, okay? You're playing 12 yards off the ball when it's 3rd and 6, and Louisville runs a hitch route for a first down. You were outplayed. You were outcoached. You were out-executed. You were out-focused. You're right, man. Every single aspect of this game, Louisville dominated in. I mean, I know that Maffa went off. He had 171 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Like, I get that. But, man, it's a catastrophic thing. The catastrophic stuff that happens to them in the red zone is exactly what plagued them a year ago. It's exactly what plagued them a year ago.
It all came back. You always return to the mean. In tough situations when you are facing adversity, any team will return to the mean, meaning that they will always revert back to the average of what they're used to doing. It was all smoke and frickin' mirrors when we had these big games against the shit teams in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, look. Stanquan Clark, 13 tackles. Joe, in the second half, he had 10 of them. I mean, like, this is how I feel about this game. One team had better playmakers than the other. Like, skill players, linebacker play. One
did a better job of setting them up to succeed, too.
Very true. Now, Maffa went off, and Joe, he's having a quiet season. I mean, the dude's just a Frank train. Okay. But Isaac Brown, the screens that were being run to Bell. See, Bell had 1 rush for 47 yards on the reverse. Joe, even that. Like, I'm looking at this kid on a reverse. I'm like, Clemson ain't got nothing like this. Like, they don't have the speed, the guy that can cut in open space. I mean, I'm going to call it what it is. Look, bro, it was an ass whooping. I'm going to call it was an ass whooping.
It's so crazy, though, that the first time that they get challenged since that Louisville game, this is the result that they put on the field. And you brought up the block field goals. I got to call upon one of the stupidest, lamest decisions that Dabo made in this game. They're down by 19. There's 13 minutes to go in the game. And they tried to kick a field goal and it got blocked.
I mean, they would have been down 6, though, Joe. I mean, I can't.
It was 4th and 5 in the red zone. They were like on like the 15-yard line.
In fairness, hold on. Here's a play log before Louisville. They went punt, 3 and out.
If you can't finish drives,
you can't
take that shot.
Okay. If we're gonna second guess, let's look at it. Punt, 3 and out. So 3 straight punts for Louisville when Dabo lined up to kick the field goal. The second one. And it got blocked. So you had stopped them for 3 straight drives and you had a block field. You're down 6 at that point. So then my defense had been making stops. If they give me another one, I can go in and get a score. And I get what he's trying to do there.
Points, though. It's not. We're not talking about like he was down by 10.
I get you. But let's say that they connect on a 40-yard field goal. They're down 6. I mean,
I think you're being a little.
Oh, it's not a bad decision.
I don't think that's a good decision. I think
it's not a bad decision. So I'm not saying it's a good one. It's just not a bad decision. All right. Let's wrap it up with this. Joe, the Big 12 is dead. Outside of BYU.
It's completely
dead. You missed it. Iowa State, an undefeated team, lost. And Kansas State got their second loss. Here, I'm going to start with Kansas State first, Joe. Avery Johnson, when he has to throw the football, is going to lose them football games. When he's forced to throw the football, he's going to lose them football games. That's it.
I don't disagree. I think that they're offensively.
But once you agree on a take that we disagree
No, I don't. I mean, I think that Avery Johnson has shown some really positive signs and steps of improvement on a week-to-week basis. But yeah, the interceptions they had in this game were completely backbreaking. It sucks because like you start to think that like Avery Johnson was starting to hit his stride, and then he had the finish to this game the way that he did that cost him it. I mean, it's bad. They're out of the playoff picture for me. I mean, they can still technically win the Big 12, I believe, because they have slightly boxed out Colorado because they have the head-to-head. So assuming that they win out and they beat Iowa State, they have that benefit there. It's the tiebreakers in this conference are a shit show.
Okay, here's the problem issues that I have. You ready? Joe, this was the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's the last 7 drives for Kansas State. You ready?
Yeah.
Turnover on downs, punt, field goal, interception, punt, interception.
Shit offense.
Number one, you're missing an OC that can call plays. That's what I feel like when I watch Kansas State. Your OC's at another place and you're struggling based off the personnel that you have. I feel like you're trying to be Colin Klein when you're not Colin Klein. That's number one.
Yeah.
Joe, the turnovers are they're so bad. They're so bad. If you limit him to just being in the pocket, he's got problems. I'm sorry. And that is what happened with Kansas State in this one. It's what happened.
I know that we had a whole debate on play calling with Carson Beck, but there is still truth to be said that there could be better positioning to set up a young man to make better plays.
Yeah, but turnover again. It's not a coach's fault for a turnover. Once the ball snapped, it's your decision to throw the ball.
Understandable.
Okay, like we can blame a lot. Come on. Hey, you know what I'd love for him to do?
What?
If it's not there, instead of turning the ball, you're too athletic. We are trying to fit square pegs and round holes. 2 reads and you get out of there. That's who you are. You're too good. Joe, Jane Daniels and the Commanders. The Commanders are 7-2. You know what he really does? 3 reads and I'm gone. You know how I know? He told me. I mean, we're on the beat, and he's sitting here like, he goes, yeah, brother, 3 reads and I'm gone. You're just too good of an athlete not to have that mentality. Stop sitting in the pocket. All right, Iowa State. Joe, our Red Raiders. Remember the Red Raiders cut a video with us with Taj Brooks, and it was the Taj Brooks, Ruffino, and Joe show game as Taj Brooks seals the deal. 25 carries, 122 yards, and 1 touchdown. We are the Red Raiders, baby.
Oh, no. So now we're suddenly back on Texas.
I never left.
Texas Tech.
I never left.
Sure you didn't. You haven't brought them up since right now. But Taj Brooks, yes, it was very fitting that he was the one who scored the game-winning touchdown. And I kind of was wondering, it's not that much time left. Why are you running the ball to the outside with your running back? And then I reminded myself, oh, it's Taj Brooks. Of course, he's going to get into the end zone. Credit to them for finishing that game. It feels like Iowa State's defense has had some serious issues over the past couple of weeks, and they've had a lot of trouble stopping good running backs. RJ Harvey ran all over him. And then now we saw this past game, Taj Brooks ran all over him. When they face anyone with a talented rushing attack, they're getting ran all over. I think that's going to hurt them when they play against Kansas State. And if they theoretically played BYU in the Big 12 championship game, I think it would hurt them as well.
Joe, what do I tell you about people and the way that they wear their hats?
What does that have to do? Okay, because you're saying that it's all because of Matt Campbell lost because of his stupid hat shit.
Joe, they lost by 1.
Because of his hat.
And because he went for 2 points when he didn't need to. They missed a 2-point field conversion. The game should have been tied. It's a massive blunder by him. And I tell you this every time, and you don't listen. People that wear their hats that way, you just cannot trust. Why did you go for 2? Why? Please tell me.
He is, and one of the things we've talked about with Matt Campbell, he has always been bound every year. He's always bound to make one
boneheaded, stupid decision, and it cost him. It cost them massively.
Completely did. This isn't like an original, like really developed take, but to put both these games together one by one, there is not a good enough and competitive enough Big 12 team to, one, be a threat in the playoff, and then 2, there are not enough teams to be options to be second teams to get in for the Big 12. It's going to be one team, and whoever it is going to get their asses kicked in the first round. They're going to get knocked out. Or in the second round, rather, because they're going to get a bye.
Chalk always wins. And what I mean by that, when you recruit better players at some point, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Taj Brooks, Josh Kelly. Joe, when the teams that have, here's the reason Colorado's going off. When you have freaks of nature that are better than the guys in front of you, you're winning football games. So you want to know why Colorado didn't make a bowl last year? The Pac-12 had an unnormal amount of players that are in the NFL.
Right. And now they're facing off against a conference that has very few. I've seen some people push back, and I'm sorry, we don't have a lot of Big 12 fans, so like I almost don't feel bad about making this statement because I don't think I'm really offending very many of our listeners.
Outside of a couple schools, you don't have big name dudes. Like our NFL
I've seen some people get like really worked up over you can't say that the Big 12 is just G5 plus. No, it is. No, it is. G5 does this all the time in their conferences where it's not high level competition.
Well, see, here's the thing though. There is a team in Utah that's dominating the conference right now. There is one. In the beginning of the season, we thought that it was going to be the team in red, not the team in blue. And let me ask you a God's honest question. We thought that there was, again, the wrong team in Utah's dominating. We wouldn't be saying this if Utah was dominating and BYU. Like, it's role reversed. We did get the
wrong team.
Yeah, we both picked the wrong team, and we thought Utah was going to win it. The problem is, because BYU is doing it so unconventionally, we're not talking about it. So, but regardless, BYU could also lose. Joe, BYU is the only team that can lose, and it'd have to be in the Big 12 title game for them to get 2 teams in. Because there's no way that.
And I don't even. No, I would argue a 1-loss BYU team. I mean, I don't think.
Well,
I don't think SMU. I don't think SMU gets in, and they would need to have SMU to be in the field for them to have 1 loss and then to be justified of getting in.
SMU?
BYU beat SMU at the beginning of the year.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because they played each other. That's their only. But and like this is part of.
Look at SMU.
This is part of the. This is just generally part of the issue.
Remember when we shit all over SMU after week 1 or week 0? Remember that?
No, we should. Well, because it was justified. They played really bad, and they made a switch. Preston Stone was the problem, and I brought that up. And I said on the damn show that they should have gone to Kevin Jennings, and they did, and now he's been playing great.
Well, true. I still don't think they're a top 10 team.
They're not.
Okay, but somebody has them in the top 10. Anyway, Big 12's chaos. It is what it is. All right. We're back tomorrow. We got a big week this week.
Yeah, I was looking at the slate. We have a lot of games to talk about. A lot of crazy games to talk about.
By the way, Joe, I looked at the totals here. I have not opened the comments all night, so I'm sure they're killing me. 858 comments.
I've gotten. Oh, we had a couple super chats that we didn't get to. Let's
Okay.
try to get to this really quickly, and then we'll wrap up here.
All right, Cody McGee with a $10 super chat says thoughts on NCAA fining coaches and suspending coaches for players faking injuries. Your thoughts, Joe?
I think they have to do it. It's very clear that coaches like Kiffin are doing it, and it's opened the door for other coaches to consider doing it as well. Yeah, it's the only way to stop it.
Here's my question: How do you know an injury's fake?
That's the problem.
And then here's the question. Okay, what happens if the kid wasn't injured and you suspend them? Like if you hit a coach off of that and they sue your ass.
Right. It's a very good point. It's a very messy situation to figure out.
There are blatant ones, but you got to be on, beyond a doubt. The only way that you could stop it, I saw somebody say this: put a doctor on both sidelines from the SEC to administer what's going on with the injury.
Well, I think a lot of training staffs already have doctors on the sidelines.
No. The SEC hires a doctor that sits on both sidelines, and when there's an injury,
that's a good idea.
They go out and monitor. So you know what? They're overkeeping team doctors because those team doctors are going to stick up for their team. So if the SEC sends a doctor into like a medical tent, like, you can't fake it.
It's a good idea.
That's the solution I came up with. I think it would work. That's why I need to be a part of the Josh Pate's commissioner staff. I'm going to clip this and send it to him. I just came up with faking injuries like this.
Okay.
More oversight. Elks says Howard is better than Kyle McCord. We lose yesterday with Honda Civic.
He also has this. Will Howard
is an upgrade over Beck, right, Joe?
Alex, I appreciate you, and you're one of our favorite listeners. But like, oh shit!
I think Elks just cut your cord.
Are you just going to not talk while I'm trying to fix my cable?
I'm waiting. I'm going to make this very embarrassing for you.
All I was saying was, I still don't think Will Howard. I think that Will Howard plays to exactly what I said. He's slightly above average. That was been my whole take this whole offseason. I've pushed back against everyone that said that he was going to be a first rounder. He was going to be a Heisman Trophy winner. He made bad decisions in that game, but he also made some really good plays, exactly as I've described him. So I'm not backing off that take.
He's good enough for them to be in a natty picture. I don't know if he's good enough to get him over the hump. But here's the thing, though, Elks. I think that time is kind of surpassed, right? You can't come in here, look, you know what? Come in here every week giving us $5 to $2. I'll take your money, But at the same time, we got to be focused on something else besides that. If you're Ohio State, you're too far in the season. Joe, we're coming down the stretch here. Douglas Witt with a $10 super chat says Georgia versus Oregon for natty ?
I think it makes the most sense right now. They're the two best teams to this point. Like, I just don't know who that third team is right now who we'd put in that conversation. I don't know. Actually, I don't think that there's an answer. You could put anybody there. You could put Miami. You could put Texas. You could put Ohio State.
Joe, there's so many teams that could get hot and peak at the right moment.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I need more evidence.
But here's the truth. Can I be real with you? I know you'll say yes with Oregon. I don't know if you're outright sure on any of these teams.
Good point.
Like, let me ask you this question. What if Ole Miss, who, by the way, scored how many last week? 66, 63? By the way, went away from what apparently some people said they went away from head comms, like the radios and helmets. They went hurry up and bopped Arkansas. Again, if that defense plays like that and they can do what we just saw them do, there's so many teams that have the – anyway. Cody McGee with a $10 super chat says, will James Franklin be better off at Oklahoma State if they move off of Gundy, or Florida State if they move off Norvell? Here's the thing.
Somebody bigger is going to go after him.
Franklin's a Pennsylvania guy. They're going to have to fire him. He's not moving on.
No, dude. I really think that, because think about how Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly are the perfect examples here. I really think that somebody
and
is
also
going to
wasn't their homes where they were.
But
he's a Penn State guy, though.
My camera disconnected. We're
Jesus, Joseph. All right.
Well, we went very long today, but no, I don't think that he's gonna. I think he's gonna end up elsewhere. I don't think he's gonna stay at Penn State.
This is what you call an episode blacked.
Oh, Christ.
See you tomorrow. Peace.